Hey guys, welcome back. So today we'll be multiplying square roots. Let's look at this example here. The square root of 12 times the square root of 3. First, we are going to combine our 12 times 3. 12 times 3, this is going to equal 36. So now we have the square root of 36. And the square root of 36, this is going to equal 6. So your final answer here is 6. The square root of 8 times the square root of 6. We are going to combine our 8 times 6, and 8 times 6, this is going to equal the square root of 48. The square root of 48, we can simplify this into the square root of 16 times the square root of 3. The square root of 16 is a perfect square. This is going to equal 4. And then you have times the square root of 3. I cannot simplify this any further. So that's why you're going to notice we're going to leave this alone the way it is. So your final answer here is 4 times the square root of 3. With the square root of 2x times the square root of 6x. When we combine these, you are going to get the square root of 2x times the square root of 6x. When you multiply these here, you're going to get the square root of 12x squared. Now we're going to simplify this. So 12x squared can be broken down into 4x squared times 3. And when I simplify this, you're going to get the square root of 4x squared times the square root of 3. Notice here that the square root of 4, this is going to equal 2. And then the square root of x squared, notice that these 2's are going to cancel out and you'll be left with just x here. And then we have times the square root of 3. As you can see, we cannot simplify that any further. So your final answer here is just going to be 2x times the square root of 3. When you get to this section here, another way that you can solve this, so let's say we did our 12x squared here, and let's say we separated all of our terms here, so the square root of 4 times the square root of 3 times the square root of x squared. Notice here that you're going to get the square root of 4, this is going to be 2, and then you have the square root of 3, you cannot simplify that. But then here, when you get to your x squared, remember your 2's are going to cancel out, and you'll just be left with x. So your final answer here, again, you're going to get 2x and then times the square root of 3 when you are combining all of your terms here. Let's look at this example here. So we have negative 4 times the square root of 30 times 5 times the square root of 30 as well. We have our negative 4 and our 5. We're going to multiply that first, and then times the square root of 30, and then times again the square root of 30. So negative 4 times 5, this is going to equal negative 20. So we already have that. But pay attention here to your square roots. Notice that the square root of 30 times the square root of 30, based on our property rule, the square root of a number times another square root of that same number, your final answer here is just going to be that number. So for an example, the square root of 30 times the square root of 30, your final answer here is just going to be the answer 30. So let's say you did not know about this property rule. So let's say you multiply the square root of 30 times the square root of 30. This is going to give you the square root of 900 because you're multiplying 30 times 30. And then the square root of 900, this is just going to equal 30. So as you can see, which is what we have here. So now we're going to multiply negative 20 times 30. This is going to equal negative 600. So your final answer here is negative 600. The square root of 18 times the square root of 2. 18 times 2, when we combine everything together, this is going to equal the square root of 36. And the square root of 36 is a perfect square. So the square root of 36 is going to equal 6. So your final answer here is 6. The square root of 27 times the square root of 6. We are going to combine 27 times 6. This is going to equal the square root of 162. And the square root of 162, we are going to simplify this into the square root of 9 times the square root of 18. The square root of 18, I can simplify this into the square root of 9 again times the square root of 2. Now to simplify the square root of 9, this is going to equal 3. The square root of 9 again, this is going to equal 3. And then we have the square root of 2. As you can see, we cannot simplify that any further, so I am going to leave the answer the way it is. So 3 times 3, this is going to equal 9. And then you have times the square root of 2. So your final answer here is going to be 9 times the square root of 2. Negative 2 root 10 times 4 root 10 as well. First thing we're going to do is multiply our coefficients here. So negative 2 times 4. So we have negative 2 times 4. Then we have the square root of 10 times the square root of 10. And remember, if you have the square root of a number times the square root of that same number, your final answer here is just going to be that number based on our property rule. Or let's say you did not know the property rule, and let's say you actually did simplify this answer. This is going to equal the square root of 100 because we did 10 times 10. And then the square root of 100 is going to equal 10. All right, so don't forget, you can use the property rule to save you some time, or if you do simplify it and go the long way, you are still going to get the answer of 10. So remember, this right here, this is going to equal 10. So we have negative 2 times 4. This is going to give us negative 8. And then negative 8 times 10, this is going to give us negative 80. So your final answer here is going to be negative 80. The square root of 6 times the square root of 12. We are going to multiply 6 times 12. 6 times 12 is 72. Now we're going to simplify the square root of 72 into the square root of 9 times the square root of 8. We have our square root 9 here. And my 8, we can simplify this further because we have the square root of 4 times the square root of 2. And now we're going to solve. The square root of 9, this is going to equal 3 times the square root of 4. This is going to equal 2. And then we have times the square root of 2. I cannot simplify that any further, so we are just going to write the square root of 2 here. And now we're going to multiply. So we have 3 times 2. This is going to equal 6. And then you have your square root of 2 here. And your final answer here is going to be 6 times the square root of 2. And when you get to this step right here, so the square root of 72, another way that you can solve this, the square root of 72 can be simplified into the square root of 36 times the square root of 2. And then as you can see here, the square root of 36, this is going to equal 6 times the square root of 2. And as you can see, you'll also get the same answer here as well, 6 times the square root of 2. All right, so that is all for today, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys.